Welcome to the All Things Endurance podcast. I'm your host, Rick Prince, and I'm excited to have on the show today Dr. Lara Pence. She is a licensed clinical psychologist and the founder of the Coach Collective. So, Laura, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for having me. Super stoked to be here.
Yeah, and I should say that when we first conversed, I didn't know you, I didn't know anything about the Coach Collective, and then I found out we have all these mutual
I know.
connections, people that I really, really respect that couldn't say enough good things about you and the Coach
Mhm.
Collective. So I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
I mean, that's always a really nice thing to hear. You never want to hear the opposite. Like,
Right,
I've never really heard of you, and do you live under a rock? So,
right.
no, but I mean, the same. Like, I had heard so much about USCA, and yeah, it was time for us to meet.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that being said, maybe you could give our listeners a little bit more about yourself.
Sure.
Obviously, as I mentioned, you're a clinical psychologist, but also more about yourself as well as a coach collective.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a clinical psychologist here in Colorado. I work primarily with professional and elite athletes. So something that I make to anyone who shows up at my quote unquote doorstep very clear is that I'm actually not a sports psych. I'm not a sports psychologist. I'm a clinical psychologist. So my training and by trade is much more clinical than it is sport
Mm,
focused. But quite frankly, that serves me so well in the work that I do with athletes, because one of my primary approach when I work with athletes is to really work from that whole person perspective, to really help them understand that everything in their life impacts everything in their life.
mm,
And so they may come to me for, performance improvement or, something in this specific realm of sport. But they find over time that their performance is connected to all of these other things in their life.
sure.
So the bulk of what I do is that clinical work with athletes of all different types: runners, football players, soccer players, all the whole arena, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then a few years ago, I founded something called the Coaches Collective. And that really came from my observations of two things. One, in the work that I did with athletes, I noticed, of course, that they were talking about their coaches. And it was kind of binary in their approach. It was either my coach is probably the most influential person in my life, and I love them, and they have changed my life in all the most amazing ways, or my coach is one of the most influential people in my life, and it's really hurting me. And
Mm,
it's damaging my self-esteem and my confidence and my relationship with sport. So of course, my perspective, I really work on a whole team approach. So when I'm working with athletes, I like to be in touch with their coach. I like to be in touch with their dietitians, things of that nature. So I really wanted to sort of better understand the coaching landscape and then be able to provide a space where coaches can actually improve the skills and how they're working with their athletes. But it also came from the conversations we were having that started actually when Simone Biles pulled herself out of the Olympics around
mm,
mental health in sport and how important mental health is, and considering mental health when we talk about the sports arena. And there was so much incredible conversation at the time about that, but what there wasn't was a guideline for coaches. There
mm,
was safe sport about like, well, how to report if it's not going bad. But there really
sure.
wasn't an arena that was like, hey, coaches, here's what you should be on the lookout for. Here's what you should be aware of. Here's how to really understand your athletes from a mental wellness, mental health perspective. So I also wanted to create something that bridged that gap. So the Coaches Collective is a full-blown curriculum that walks coaches through some really important psychological concepts on just the human being that's in
Mm,
front of them. We all are human, but we actually are not all experts in being human. Like I have a
yeah,
foot, but I'm not a podiatrist. I
right.
definitely eat food, but I'm not a dietitian. And I think sometimes we come to the table with like, well, I did it. I know how to do it myself, so I can do it for somebody else.
Sure.
But actually, we need more skills in that. We need
Yeah.
more strategies in that. So the Coaches Collective really serves to help coaches become more psychologically informed so that they can better approach their athletes through the lens of trust, through the lens of boundaries, through the lens of, other psychological concepts that might hurt performance, like shame or imposter syndrome or performance anxiety, things of that nature. And then it also serves as a community for coaches to come together and collectively learn, grow, and empower each other. So those are really the goals of the Coaches Collective.
That's amazing. Well, as a former personal trainer who spent 20 years of my life doing that in Manhattan, myself and all the other trainers, we used to joke that we would be much better served with a degree in psychology versus
Yeah.
physiology because, you're sort of this random person you're not their family, you're
Yeah,
not their colleague, and they feel like whatever they tell you, sort of the buck stops there. So the floodgates open. And like
that's right.
99% of the time, I'm like, I have no idea what to do with this information. Like, this is
Yeah,
just
that's
way
absolutely right.
above my
Yeah.
pay grade. So
Yeah.
I say that because I think what you're doing is clearly just so important because it's one of those things that, I've never found it discussed anywhere. Like, it's such a big thing, for the coach or for the trainer, but they have no resources. So this is
That's exactly
amazing.
right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And before I developed the full-blown curriculum, I actually went out and I interviewed like 60 coaches just that I
Mm,
didn't know. I cold reached out to them on Instagram and I was like, "Hey, I'm thinking about developing this program, but I want to know what you don't know."
yeah,
Because I obviously come from the psychological world. And so a lot of times I think to myself, well, gosh, they know that. Like
sure.
everyone knows that. And then everyone's like, "No, did you go to graduate school?" So
Yeah.
so in those interviews, one of the things I found, Rick, was that coaches had a real hard time with their scope of practice.
Mm,
Like when is it my job to like have that conversation with this athlete that I'm worried may not be fueling themselves well? Or if an athlete comes to me and they're talking about that they've been drinking a lot, what conversation should I have with them?
sure.
Should I just do the eek, not my job, go to therapy? Or if I engage with them, am I going to get in trouble? Like, is this out of my scope of work? And I don't think, I know coaches hold so much power.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important that coaches feel equipped in some of those conversations because the conversation cannot always stop with, I think you should see a therapist, or I think
Hmm.
you should talk to someone for so many different reasons. A lot of people aren't going to go. They don't have the money to go. They don't have the resources to go. They don't want to go.
Yeah.
And so if coaches can begin to have certain conversations to some degree, of course, they're not mental health professionals unless they are, to some degree, I think it really, really helps athletes feel human. It
Yeah.
just helps athletes feel human.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so important. Um, so in your time in your practice of being a psychologist, as well as when you put on your coaches collective hat, what are some things that you found that hold coaches back from kind of reaching their potential from a coaching realm?
Yeah, I would say hands down, the thing that I see the most is that a coach is not in alignment with their own set of values.
Hmm. Interesting.
So, and this is actually one of the first exercises we do in the coaches collective is a values identification exercise. And what I mean by values are like the principles by which you choose to live your life, right? So, and this is a little bit of a macabre way of saying it, but if something were written on my tombstone about how I lived my life, those are my values.
Okay.
She lived with adventure, she loved to laugh, she adored her family, and she was always curious. Like those would
Hmm.
probably be mine, right?
Okay.
Um, so we all have a set of values, and normally we do have a set of personal values, but we also have a set of professional values. Sometimes they're the same, sometimes they overlap. For me, they're a little bit different. The values in my professional work are collaboration, honesty, and laughter. So
Hmm.
if those aren't showing up for me in my professional relationships with my clients, then I'm out of alignment. I am not actually operating with my values in mind. And
Got it.
so when I see coaches kind of like flailing in their career, a lot of times it's because they don't know what they value, or they value something, but they're not operating in alignment with that. So for
Okay.
example, like if honesty were one of your values, right? One of your core professional values, that you are going to be honest with your athletes about what they need to do, how they need to show up, how they need to improve, things of that nature. But you're working with an athlete who you suspect may not be fueling well, right? Like may really, really be under fueling in their training, but you feel so stuck because you're just not sure. Do I say something? Do I not say something? What if I say something, piss them off, and then they want to fire me, right? Or what if they feel so much shame and embarrassed that they quit and I never
Hmm.
hear from them again, right? So you choose to not say something. In that moment, you're out of alignment with your values. And so
Got
you're
it.
not really like stepping in to the full to the full kind of character that you are meant to be. And that really impacts how we show up in our relationships. And a coach athlete relationship is a relationship.
Sure.
So I think in that way, that is the thing I see the most, is that when coaches kind of put their values aside, or maybe just aren't in tune and have never kind of thought about their values and find themselves operating out of alignment, then they are definitely not showing up in who they are meant to be and how they are meant to contribute. And that undoubtedly impacts their full potential.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I've never heard that perspective. And ancillary to that, I guess so my next question is, I'm guessing that a lot of coaches don't really realize that's a thing, that they're
Yeah.
not aware of that. So that being said, how much of that do you think, okay, I'm the coach, I'm having some of these sort of misalignment, if we want
Yeah.
to call it that. But because I'm not aware of that, I
Yeah.
identify my lack of growth or my lack of sustainability as a coach in other things. Do you
Yeah.
find that to be the case then? Like, oh, it's
Oh, for
because I don't
sure.
do social media enough. Oh, that
Yes.
client just sucks. They didn't like me anyway, or whatever.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It's so interesting because so many, I mean, this is one of those things where I'm like, well, everybody understands values, everybody knows values. And then I get like, oh my gosh, I've never thought about that
Right.
before. So in the Coaches Collective, this being our first activity, I'm always struck with how coaches are like, gosh, I really value that. Why am I not doing that?
Hmm.
Like, for example, like a lot of the individuals that I work with like to have fun. I mean, obviously, you could probably guess that I like to have fun,
Yeah.
right? So, but in your career and in your profession, and especially on social media, if you feel a little embarrassment or you're a little socially insecure or not sure how to show up, like having fun might be hard for you in the face of
Hmm.
other people or with the possibility of judgment. And so certainly I've had some coaches sort of say like, gosh, I like to have fun. Like, why am I not having more fun with my clients? Why aren't we
Hmm.
joking more, or just having a better time when we're training or when I'm at the gym with them doing the workouts? So yeah, I definitely think that there is just a general sort of lack of awareness in some ways. But also I think one of the hard things about aligning with values is that it does require you to really ask that question, which for some is quite hard. What matters to me? Like, what are the principles by which I want to coach? And oftentimes, coaches will choose principles that they have witnessed in others. So,
Okay.
for example, like commitment matters a lot to me as a coach. Does it? Or did it matter to your soccer coach who was really
Hmm.
influential for you? But maybe it actually doesn't matter that much to you. Maybe you can have somebody, choose to train for a marathon, but a week before the marathon, they're like, you know what? I don't really want to do that. I'm not really interested in that. And would that matter to you? Maybe it wouldn't matter to you.
Yeah.
So I think,
Interesting.
yeah. So I think the other piece is that when we take a look at our values, it's so important to also ask, like, is it really my value? Or is this value being influenced by past relationships with coaches or my own relationship to the sport that is showing up that maybe it actually doesn't matter all that much to me?
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if hard questions is maybe the right way to put it, but it certainly requires a lot of sort of really looking inside yourself and
Yeah,
being honest with yourself
yeah,
and much deeper than just surface level, right? Because then
totally.
you don't really get all the good stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the concepts that I talk about a lot is looking inside to thrive out.
Hmm.
And it's really important to do that. Like with every exercise that we go through in the Coaches Collective, I ask the coaches to do it themselves for themselves,
Okay.
So because we have to understand ourselves better if we really want to better show up for the people that we're working with. And in a helping profession, which coaching is, and in a profession that is grounded in the relationship, which coaching is, it is really important to understand oneself. If you don't understand, for example, what your activating agents are, like what triggers you when you work with athletes, then you could become totally emotionally dysregulated in the face of an athlete who's engaging in a certain way that triggers you and have
Hmm.
no idea. So
Yeah.
you really have to take a look inside to really reach that full potential that you're talking about and coach in the way that you want to.
Yeah. Such great information. So the next question, this is maybe a little bit perhaps too general, but what are some of the most important traits that you find that coaches should have? And
Yeah.
obviously that'll differ between individuals, but I feel like there's probably not a lot of people, more qualified to answer that question than yourself, given your background with the Coaches Collective and so on.
Yeah, sure. Well, the first one I would say is a word I use all the time. It's one of my favorite things. I just did a leadership assessment, and this was like the number one thing that came up. And I was like, I know myself so well, which is curiosity.
Okay.
Coaches have to be curious. I think, I mean, this is, I don't know. Yes, I feel confident enough to say this. If all of the athletes that I work with took some kind of leadership assessment, I bet that all of them, one of their top 3 to 5 traits would be curiosity.
Okay.
Because in order to engage in sport in a way that's really meaningful, you kind of have to wonder, what if? What if I was able to run 3 miles? What if I could do a marathon? Like,
Yeah.
what if I could try out for that team? What if I could get on the podium? Is it possible for me to be a champion? What if I beat my pace? Like, we have to be asking these questions, right? And in order to do that, you have to be somewhat curious. And so that has to be matched by the coach. The coach has to be able to ask the same questions. Like, what if I could push them a little bit more? Or what would it be like if we pulled back? How would their body respond if we did this? What if I tried something new here? How would this look? Like, there's that curious perspective of like just maybe almost allowing yourself to surrender to possibility, right?
Mm.
And so for coaches, I would say that being curious is just one of the most essential things. And what differentiates a good coach from a great coach is if they're curious about the human being that's also in front of them, not
Got it.
just the training.
Okay.
So, what is their family life like at home? Because they've talked a lot about being overwhelmed. I wonder how that's impacting their training. Hmm. She did tell me about that miscarriage 2 years ago, and I think it's around the anniversary. Is it possible that she's having a hard time with training right now because of that? Like, that curious mind is really going to help coaches understand the human being that's in front of them.
Yeah.
So, absolutely, I would say that curiosity is incredibly high up there.
Okay.
When I'm working with someone and I see a lack of curiosity, it it's astounding to me, number one, how obvious it is, but number two, how much it's impacting them, like at a ground level, just in getting stuff done during the day, because
Yeah.
they're answering things before they even ask the question. Like, well, I can't do that. Instead of,
Yeah.
I wonder if I could do that. So that
Yeah.
curiosity would definitely be my number one.
Okay. Okay. It's so interesting that you were saying that about, what else, being curious about what else is going on in their life or their family
Yeah.
life. And not to kind of go off this topic, but one of our contributors, he spoke at our conference, Dr. Lawrence Van Lingen.
Mm.
He had this really interesting thing. He works with a lot of high-level athletes as well. He was working with this elite national team athlete, and they had a horrible coach, not in practice as far as like, okay, here's your training plan, but just they didn't mesh. It was just this sort of
Yeah.
toxic relationship. And it affected their performance so much they were almost thrown off the national team because they were performing so poorly. They switched coaches or started working with Dr. Van Lingen, basically doing the exact same workouts, if I remember correctly, and they became one of the top performers on the team. And I think I know people give everything so focused on the physical,
Yeah.
like, oh, what did you do to get this person versus no, they just didn't have that level of toxicity in their life anymore. And I,
Yes.
I was astounded because like I gave it, I'm like, okay, that's a thing. But to
Yeah.
that degree, I was just blown away. I was just like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh. So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
so glad you mentioned that.
Yeah. Gosh, it just matters so much. I mean,
Yeah.
I know I'm a psychologist, so I'm always going to lean heavy on like the mental human side, but it just really does. And for anyone who's listening, like just think about it in your own life when you have somebody who believes in you as a human versus just believes in what you have to offer as a skill, a trade, or a talent. It just is so different. We just
Yeah.
invest so differently.
Yeah.
So I love hearing that because A, it totally validates what I think. But
Right.
B, also, it's just so important to see that, like, yes, and that relationship matters.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the other thing. I mean, again, this is one of those things where I was like, well, of course, coaches and athletes are in a relationship. Like they know that, right? And
You're
then,
right.
in the coaches collective, sometimes coaches would be like, I never really thought about like the work I do with athletes as a relationship.
Ah,
And it's like, okay, yes, like it is a relationship that is grounded on trust,
yeah.
that requires mutual respect and deep levels of communication,
Yeah.
So I think like those tenets are just so central.
Yeah, completely agree. So, and this is, really specific, I would say, with your work with the Coaches Collective. But if you could just talk for a minute about how important is the role of community when it comes to the success of a coach?
Yeah. Oh, huge, huge. I mean, I work in a private, my private practice is my primary, career. And I'm here at my kitchen table all day long. Yes, talking to humans like I'm talking to you and in relationship all day long. And yet at times I feel very lonely. I feel
Hmm.
very isolated. I feel very much like the only people I talk to all day long are my clients, you know?
Right.
Um, and as much as, of course, the more in the work you are, the better at the work you do. It is so critical to have colleagues. It is so critical to have people that you can call who you can ask a question to, like, hey, I'm working with this person. What do you think? Right. Or, gosh, do you ever get so frustrated with when someone does this? Right. Like, it's really important to have colleagues in our shared space of career to be in connection with.
Yeah.
Because all of the same things that show up with our athletes show up in us, right?
Sure.
Like imposter syndrome. Who am I to coach this person?
Right.
Shame, like I'll never be a good enough coach that they are, right?
Yeah.
Burnout, like, oh my gosh, if I have to have this conversation one more time, I'm just not sure what I'm going to do. Like,
Right.
we all experience the same thing that our athletes experience. It's something we call parallel process in the psychology world. But it's really important to be able to have our trusted allies who we can connect with and be in community with so that we can work through some of those things.
Yeah.
So community is just key. I mean, I think that shared spaces in one's career are really essential to not only improving your skill set and improving the way that you do things, but also for that common humanity of
Yeah.
remembering that, oh, yeah, they go through that too. Or, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
another coach is just as frustrated. Or, oh, yeah, another coach, like they got fired last week from their athlete too. I'm not the only one getting fired,
Right.
whatever it is.
Right.
So I think that part's really important.
Yeah, it's just so interesting when we get feedback from our coaches that have gone through our program. It's really interesting because we have this Facebook coaches group, and I think there's like over 3,000 coaches in there. And the general theme is, yeah, your certification was great. I learned a bunch of stuff about whatever, but the real value they find is in that coaches group because they
Yeah.
feel it's sort of a safe space where everyone has the same baseline education and they can just ask anything, and it's I'm always blown away by the questions and the responses. I mean, I certainly learned so much just by sort of, being a stalker in there and looking at the different, conversations that go on. And it's really cool.
Yeah, it's really shared learning is really powerful. And I don't mean like shared learning like, oh, we both read the same chapter of that book, but I mean shared learning in our experience of actually what we're doing with the
Hmm.
people we work with. And like I said before, we're in the helping profession. Coaches are in the helping profession and they're working with humans. Humans are hard.
Yeah.
Humans are hard to work with, right? And so it's so important for us to have trusted people who we can go to and talk to about the work that we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned this before, the word trust. And I feel like
Yeah.
there's so much information out there, specifically, in the training realm, even just like training information in the age of like influencers and TikTok. And, a lot of it's good, a lot of it's horrible. Um, and how important is trust in the coaching relationship? And moreover, how can coaches build that trust with their athletes or potential athletes that are maybe looking to hire them? Because I feel like everyone's an expert these days, right? Whether it be Chat GPT or I just go on Instagram, like I can find all this information. And
Yeah.
we've heard from several coaches that like, how do I really create that trust that okay, I am an authority here. I really know what I'm talking about versus, whatever that person is on TikTok or whatever other scenario.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a great question. So first, to double down on what you said, trust is imperative. Like we know that when athletes trust their coaches, they're more likely to perform better, but they're also less likely to experience burnout. They're less likely to experience any mental health issues like anxiety or depression. And they're more likely, and this is one that I like the most, to just be satisfied in their sport, like to
Yeah.
just be happy with running or be happy with soccer or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, so it's so essential. And I think that um, sometimes we don't, or I wouldn't say sometimes, we don't talk about it enough. This is one of those things again where it's like, well, I trust other people, so I know how to build trust. Do you? Like, let's talk about that a little bit. So we actually use an acronym called RAISE when we talk about trust and how you build trust. And the first word is reliability.
Mm,
Do you do what you say you're going to do? And this, I think, is where where it starts. So for example, like if you're having an onboarding call with an athlete, you're early if not on time,
yeah,
right? Sure. If you say you're going to email them at so and before, Friday, you email them before Friday,
yeah,
right? If they ask you, hey, how does iron actually impact how I feel? You're going to find the science, you're going to find the research, and you're going to deliver it to them. And you don't have to know it. You don't have to your point, know all the things. But if
sure.
you say, you know what, I don't know, but I'm going to look into that and I'll email you, you do that, right? If you're a coach working with teams and you're in person, like if practice starts at 4, you're there at 4.
Yeah,
If you said you were going to bring the jerseys, you bring the jerseys. Like reliability, it's such a simple concept. And people think, well, it doesn't really matter if I'm 5 minutes later. It doesn't really matter if I email them the next day. Those tiny little uh, moments where we don't double down on trust, we begin to lose trust.
yeah,
And trust is
completely
built
agree.
in small moments. A lot of people think that it's like a grand sweeping gesture of trust. It's really not. And when you're working with athletes, the other thing that really matters is understanding that like reliability also means that you know your athlete. So for example, if your athlete is working to train for Boston and you get that athlete confused with Chicago, that's going to matter,
Yeah,
And so then this is how I speak to like, don't take on more work than you can handle, because if you're jostling up athletes in your head, that's not going to look good from a trust perspective. So
yeah,
reliability is first. Accountability is second, which means that like you are accountable to your job and you are following through when you make a mistake. So if you slipped on something, if you struggled or made a mistake, you own up to that in front of
yeah,
your athlete. The third is integrity, which is what we already talked about, this being in alignment with your values. So if you're in alignment with your values, that is going to help build trust. Because for example, when I work with my athletes, as I said before, collaboration, honesty, and laughter are really essential to me in my work with my clients, right? If I'm not honest with an athlete and then somehow they find out that I wasn't honest with them, they're going to know, like she said, that mattered to her and she's not telling me XYZ, like it's going to start to fracture that trust.
yeah,
So being in alignment with your values allows you to show up fully in who you are, and that help builds trust. It also helps builds trust because you become predictable and consistent. Like if you're showing up as a different person every day because your values are changing every day, nobody's going to know what to hold on to. They're like, well, who is Rick? One day he's this and one day he's that, and I don't know who he is, right? So
yeah,
not only is that reliability, but it's integrity. Safety is another one. And by that, I mean psychological safety. Like, do your athletes feel like they can have conversations with you? And most importantly, do they feel like they can mess up? Do they feel
mm,
like they can make a
yeah,
mistake? Do they feel like they can skip a workout? And that not necessarily that you're not going to hold them to like, hey, what happened? How come you didn't? But that it's not going to be a place where them not doing the workout feels scary. Like I
yeah,
can't tell my coach because then, what would they say or what would they do? And the last is that expertise part. And what I mean by that is twofold. One, you need to be an expert in you. What are you good at? What do you know? Right. And for new coaches, this can be hard because they can be like, well, I just started. I feel like I don't know anything. Well, you know something. And even if it's not necessarily about coaching or training philosophy or what do you know about human beings? What do you know? Right. So it's
yeah,
about like trying to find that thing that you know and learning about it. But it's also about educating yourself. We trust people who are also doing the work behind the scenes to be better in their career. And so,
yeah.
for example, if someone said to me, like, well, what do you know about Red S? And I was like, wait, what's Red S? They'd probably be like, wait, you say that you used to work with eating disorders and you don't know what that is.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, so I think that's the other part is like remembering that there are really important things for you to learn as a coach. And then to also say when you don't know,
Yeah.
to also say, like, actually, I don't have the answer for you, but I'll either go find it or I'll put you in touch with somebody who does, or I can connect you with a space where you can learn about it. Right.
Hmm.
So I think those 5 things are like central to building trust: reliability, accountability, integrity, safety, and expertise.
Yeah, that's, those are things when I worked in the fitness industry as a fitness manager and general manager, I always try to equate. And it's so funny you said that about reliability. When I first got into management and was overseeing trainers, I literally thought my main job as far as like counseling or rating trainers up was going to be because they did something stupid with one of their clients, their arm fell off, or they,
Yeah.
I don't know, got in a fight on the floor or something. It was not. It was exactly what you said. It was showing up on time, returning
Yeah.
emails and phone calls of potential clients. It was never the stuff, these big ticket things that I thought that, someone trained someone wrong and, they got really injured. It was all just the basic stuff of any job. Just
Yes.
just do your thing, like be reliable. So I really appreciate you saying that because that's
Yeah.
that's certainly been my experience as well. It's just like, and again, those trainers that consistently were late, those trainers that were consistently didn't return emails of clients that I gave them emails to reach out to, they didn't last very long.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, we undervalue the importance of just showing up when you say you're going to,
Yeah,
and like being in the presence of and saying like, you matter enough to me for
yeah,
me to be on this phone call with you,
yeah.
I mean, like when I have a session with someone and they'll say like, I'm so sorry, I'm taking up your time. It's like taking up my time. I am meant to be here. Like I
Right,
want
right.
to be here in
Yeah,
relationship with you. Um,
sure.
and so just that element of showing up. I think especially when we live in a world where honestly, like we can get away with a lot of things because, it feels like somebody emailing you back may not be a big deal or texting you the next day may not be an issue. It's like actually showing up and doing what you say you're going to do is a commodity. It's a
Yeah,
value nowadays. And so
totally.
if you can get that nailed, man, you've come a long way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely agree with you. So you mentioned this several times already, imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And that's a big one that we see, again, as I referred to earlier in the coaches group, is that whole imposter syndrome. We hear it all the time. It's,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I got certified a year ago, I got my website set up, and then I just couldn't pull the trigger on it. I
Yeah.
couldn't I couldn't go from draft mode to live mode on my website.
Yeah.
And we see it in both new coaches as well as seasoned coaches, whether it be kind of going up to that next level. Okay, I was good at this level, but I'm not equipped at this level. So
Yeah.
what are some things you might say to some of these coaches? I don't know if help overcome it's the right word, but kind of to deal with that imposter syndrome that they are good enough, that they can do this.
Yeah. Well, actually, I love that you sort of corrected yourself as you were about to say help overcome it, because I probably stand very alone in this thought, but that imposter syndrome can actually be an opportunity rather than a threat.
Yeah.
And the reason that I think that is very similar to kind of like to other lines of thought where sometimes it's better to actually entertain what's going on than pretend it doesn't exist.
Hmm.
With imposter syndrome, I think it's an opportunity because if we pretend that the imposter is a person, right? We'll just call them imposter. What imposter is doing is asking you a question. Like, and what the question normally is, although it sounds super snarky, is like, who are you to be here? Who
Hmm.
are
Yeah.
you to make the website go live? Who are you to coach that professional athlete that just reached out to you when you've never coached a professional before, right?
Yeah.
Who are you to be certified? Who are you to be on that team when your coaches your entire life told you that you would never amount to any kind of athlete, right? So it's asking a question. And here is what I want people to do. Start answering the question. Instead of
Hmm.
saying like, I'm not going to think about it. That's so mean. I'm not going to think about it. It's like, no, let's sit down with imposter at the table. They're asking you a question. They're looking you in the eye and they're wondering, who are you to be here? Okay, who am I to be here? Did I take Rick's course? Yeah, I guess I did. Did I pass his course? Yep, I did that too. Did I do all the things necessary to become a USCA certified coach? I sure did. So like, who am I to be here? I did all the things. I deserve
Hmm.
to be here. I deserve to press live, So for example, like when I'm working with an athlete who maybe has a big time race, like, or a big game that is like, they've been working a lot, they've been working really hard towards, and they're like, well, I mean, she's starting, like, she's amazing. Who am I to go up against her?
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's answer the question. Who are
Yeah.
you? Like, what did you do? What have you done up to this point? What is your athletic resume? What's on it right now?
Yeah.
Were you just awarded this? Were you just named this? Have you just spent the last 2 months working so incredibly hard on your dribbling that it's improved tenfold? Like, how about, could we answer it with those questions? Like, okay, well, I'm Sarah, and I've been working really hard on this, and I've been doing this, and I've been doing that. So I think it's really an opportunity for us to actually, number one, answer the question. And number two, then we gain confidence from it. Because what
Mm,
we're doing in that moment is we're listing all of the things that actually have brought us to that moment. And those things matter. I used to get imposter syndrome, for example, when I would go to like conferences and present.
okay.
Primarily, which I don't do anymore because I just can't be in a hotel for an entire weekend. Like, it's just really exhausting.
Understood.
Yeah, with like no airflow whatsoever and soggy tomatoes and lettuce on a sandwich. Like, I just
Er,
want a little bit more than that on my weekends.
Yeah.
But when I used to present at conferences, I for sure would get imposter syndrome, especially at the times in my life when I was working primarily in the eating disorder stratosphere. And there would be some pretty big names in the audience or whatever it was. And there would always be that, like, who are you to be here? Like, you
Yeah.
know what you're doing. Do you even know what you're doing? And this strategy really helped, like answering the question, like, well, I've actually spent the last X number of years working in this field. This is actually the field that started my entire career. Like,
Mm,
I actually have more experience than most in this career,
yeah.
like, and I've seen this many people at this many different times. Like, it gave me an opportunity to pull up all of the data points that said, hey, you deserve to be here.
Yeah.
And then that gave me more confidence. And then I felt like I could go out and crush. Right.
Yeah.
So with the imposter, I think the thing that I want people to do is answer the question. Use it as an opportunity to answer the question as to why you are there, why you do matter, and why you're ready to go.
Yeah. That's such a great response to my question because I feel like that people just get stuck on that,
Yeah.
and then to frame it in the way that you did is, for lack of a better word, genius. I mean, it totally, it totally makes sense, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. And I think there is generally, like, you just often hear people say, like, just ignore it. Like,
yeah.
you're going to do great, ignore it. Don't ignore it. Like, sit
Yeah.
it down at the table and be like, okay, let's have this conversation. You want to talk about why I deserve to be here? Let me tell you why I deserve to be here.
Yeah, because
Like, engage with it.
if you don't, you're just kicking it down the road. You'll eventually have
Yes,
to deal with it again when the
that's
next
right.
scenario comes up,
Yeah,
I'm
that's
guessing.
right. That's right. And that's why I actually love how you didn't say like overcome, because it's really not about
Yeah.
overcoming in the moment. It's about using it as an opportunity for you to actually feel better about yourself rather than worse about yourself.
Yeah,
Mhm.
makes complete sense. So on your website, you mentioned that you meet coaches where they are, and we hear that term quite a bit. Meet people where they are, meet athletes where they are.
Yeah.
Um, how important is that concept, both in coaching as well as just life, right? I mean, like you said, you're not a sports psychologist, you're a clinical psychologist. So I feel like your perhaps take on that might be a little bit different than if I were to ask, Joe sports psychologist. So I'm really intrigued with
Totally.
what your thought is in meeting an athlete or meeting a coach where they are.
Yeah, what I mean in meeting you where you are is I am going to see the most human parts of you that you want to show me right now,
Got
as
it.
opposed to like I'm working with you because of your potential. Mm-mm.
Mm,
Nope. I'm working with you because of who you are right now in this moment. And that is really important to me because people ask me all the time, like, do people really change? Like, have you actually seen people change? Uh, yeah, people change all the time. We're
yeah,
always changing.
yeah,
And it's incredible. Like, I love what I do beyond measure. And part of why I love what I do is because I really get to see people make substantial changes in their life.
mm,
But I don't work with anyone because of the potential for them to make a change. I work with somebody because of who they are in that moment, right then and there. And
yeah,
so I think like that's what I mean by I'm going to meet you where you are, which is where you are is right now. It's in this moment. And we all have goals. We all have desires. We all have aspirations. We all have the things that we want to be or the things that we want to do. But in order for me to work with you, I can't work with that version of you. I have to work with the version that's in front of me right now. And we need to uncover all of those things that will get you from point A to point B together. But that's what I mean by like meeting you where you are is like, this is who you are right now in this moment because you cannot be anybody else right now in this
right.
moment, and so who you are right now is who I want to work with.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Mhm.
And So we've already kind of chatted about this, but final question for you. What are some traits that you found in your time, in your practice as a psychologist as well as the Coaches Collective? What are some common traits of high performing coaches?
Well, curiosity
Yeah.
for sure. I also think like, I don't know how I would nail this into a trait, but the ability to set boundaries is
Okay.
really important in the coaching stratosphere. The ability to set boundaries with your athletes, but also the ability to set boundaries with yourself.
Okay.
So, and for example, like the the coaches that I know who are the best at their job are also the coaches who know that they need to step away from their job.
Mm,
They need to at times focus on their family, right? They need to go for their own run, right? They need to get up from the computer or get away from the team and have what I call like a diverse life portfolio.
yeah.
And this is also what I find in my work with athletes is that like if an athlete is waking up and from 8 to 8 p.m. they are only focused on sport, they're just not going to perform as well as if they integrate something else into their life that takes them out of sport. Even if
Got it.
it's just for like an hour a day, right? Because
Yeah.
some of the professionals I work with, they've got sponsors, I mean, they are like beholden to the behemoth of sport, right? So they don't
Yeah.
always have the luxury, but they have to find it somewhere. So that curiosity, the ability to set boundaries, the desire, communication skills is just really, really important. And
Hmm.
it doesn't mean you have to be an extrovert by any stretch of the imagination. I don't know that I would call myself an extrovert. I think I'm probably an introvert. But I can have hard conversations with people. Again, I've been doing this for 20 years, so that's probably why. But it's important to be able to muster up courage and be bold to have certain conversations with your athletes.
Yeah.
Because I mean, communication is just so key when you're again working with human beings and knowing how to talk to them and even just things like what tone you want to use, what language lands with certain athletes versus other athletes. I think that's just really, really important. The other thing I would say is empathy. Empathy is a really, really big one. And I know that probably there might be some coaches that hear that and they're like, well, I'm not a soft coach though, I'm like a hard go get him coach.
Right.
I'm going to tell you right now, empathy is probably the hardest thing for you. So if
Yeah.
you're interested in doing something hard, work on your empathy,
Yeah.
right? And empathy is hard sometimes, especially for example, like when you do know that an athlete is capable of something, but they are really having a hard time getting there, and it's frustrating for you that they
Sure.
can't get there, right? And so having that empathy as to what might be difficult for them or what might be getting in the way is really, really important. Now, it like empathy doesn't mean that you only listen and that you don't give directive. Empathy just means that you're stepping in their shoes for a minute to understand how they might feel. And it's really important for the athletes that we work with to feel like you understand how they feel. Like that
Yeah.
really matters because in that moment, what you're saying to them really is, you're human. Like, I see you. I
Yeah.
see that you're human. I get that. So I would say empathy is also another part.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, this has been amazing. This is, I feel, I've been a trainer or I was a trainer for 20 years. I did a lot of, cycling coaching in there and I've had a lot of these conversations,
Mhm.
when I say a lot of these conversations, coaches or conversations around what is a good coach? How do you become a
Yeah,
good coach? And this is definitely a completely different perspective and one that I think is
I love that.
probably missing from the narrative in most conversations as it pertains to kind of leveling up, being a
Yeah,
better coach,
that's
right?
right.
And I think it's so kudos to you for doing such amazing
No,
work, for
thank
starting
you.
the Coaches Collective. Um, for our listeners, if you want to learn more about Dr. Laura Pence as well as the Coaches Collective, you can go to drlaurapence.com, and this will be on the show notes as well as in the outro. If anyone's interested in a US coach certification, you can use the code ATE75 for $75 off. Well, thank you so much, Laura. This has been
Of
great. Again,
course.
thank you for
Yeah.
the shift of perspective. I certainly will. It's so funny. I'm not a coach now. I run USCA, but I wish I was a coach now because I feel
Aw.
like in all of these conversations, yourself included, I feel like I'm like, God, I was really, really probably no, I don't, maybe terrible is not the right word,
Mm,
but like I view all these conversations with these people, yourself included. I'm like, wow, there was so much I didn't know or didn't
yeah.
really take into account. So maybe one of these days I'll have to put the coach hat back on and get back in the ring.
Yeah, but Rick, I love that. I feel the exact same way about me as an early career therapist because I tell people the story that like I was performing therapy in the early years of being a therapist. Like I was
Mm.
going in there as the therapist,
Yeah.
like costume on, ready to go, have the answer, you know, and and I found that like A, I probably wasn't doing very good work, and B, it just didn't feel good. Just
Yeah.
did I wasn't in alignment.
Yeah.
And so I stopped performing and started just showing up,
Yeah.
reliability, as
Yeah.
myself. Like this is who I am. Yeah, I know a lot of stuff. I for sure, but I don't have to tell you everything I know. I
Yeah.
can just look at you as a human. We can be in this room together, and that can actually create transformation.
Yeah.
So that I think is so important for coaches to remember. You are not just a disseminator of information. Like you
Yeah.
do not just disseminate information, you create the space for transformation. But in order to do that, you have to remember that you're working with a whole human being.
Yeah. And I think that's the key point, right? Because I'm sure so many coaches don't see it. It's just I'm working with Laura, the athlete, period.
Yes,
Right. And you're
yes,
trying to BQ, and that's what
yes.
our goal, and oh, whatever else is going on. That's not my problem.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what information can I give them so that they can achieve their goal
Yeah.
versus how do I create a space for them to truly transform as a human? Because we all love sport because we transform in sport. We become better versions of ourselves. We gain confidence. We connect with people. We become a better parent. Sport is an arena for so many incredible things.
Yeah.
And so that transfer, if coaches start to take that lens, like I can create a space for transformation and do more than just provide information, that's where lives really start to make a difference.
Yeah. And again, I just thought of this like the way how we do our certification doesn't matter which course you take. The first four modules are all foundational knowledge. It's sort of structured like a 4-year college degree. You learn anatomy,
Yeah.
physiology, biomechanics. And we take that as foundation. And if you don't know that, then you can't, there's no application of it because you have no
Yeah.
idea versus just saying like, oh, do this, train this, but you don't really understand why. And
Yeah.
it sounds very similar to this. Like if you don't understand the human, the whole
Yes.
person, then there can be no application, right? It's
That's
just
right.
it's just nothing there.
That's exactly right. Nailed it.
Yeah,
Nailed it, Rick. Yes.
yeah,
And so many, I think, arrive to the profession thinking they understand the human already. Well,
yeah,
I'm a human. I get what humans are like.
yeah.
Let's go a little bit deeper. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well,
Amazing.
as you just stated, you have a wealth of knowledge,
Mhm.
certainly in a very different perspective, and I think a lot of our guests have discussed on the podcast, even in the realm of psychology and coach performance and all that. So let's do this again. Let's do another one
Amazing.
sometime. I think we
Oh,
can
I
go.
would love to.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's so
I
much
always love doing
information.
podcasts where I can just like have a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love
Amazing.
it. Love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to all our listeners for tuning in. And yeah, we'll do this again.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.